A few days before the wedding, I learned that my daughter had cheated on her future husband with his father. I was in a very difficult position to tell this good young man such terrible news, or to keep this awful secret and not ruin the family's future. However, after the wedding, the answer came from where we least expected and everything resolved itself. Friends, before I open the door to one of the darkest corridors of my life, let me ask you something. What's the hardest secret you've ever had to keep? Share it in the comments below, and let's see how many of us have stood at the edge of that cliff. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because this story will test your heart. I've always believed a mother's duty was to protect her children, even from themselves. But nothing in 63 years of life had prepared me for the secret that landed in my lap 3 days before my daughter's wedding. It was a Thursday afternoon in late spring, the air thick with azalea blossoms and the smell of fondant from the cake tasting we'd just attended. Claire, my only child, was glowing lace gown fitted, hair trial perfect, flowers ordered. Her fiancé, Ethan, was the kind of man I'd prayed she'd find, gentle, loyal, the kind who fixed your storm door without being asked. His parents, Richard and Martha, seemed equally wonderful, until the day I walked in on something that made my knees nearly give out. I had dropped by Richard's lake house to deliver a box of heirloom champagne flutes for the rehearsal dinner. The front door was ajar. I stepped inside, calling out. From the upstairs balcony, laughter floated down. Claire's laughter, only softer, breathier. Then Richard's voice, low and intimate, answered. My heart sank before my feet even climbed the stairs. I don't know why I opened the bedroom door. Perhaps some foolish hope I'd misheard, but there they were. My daughter, my flesh and blood tangled in sheets with her future father-in-law. Claire's eyes went wide. Richard's mouth formed a curse. I backed out, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped the crystal box. The drive home was a blur of rain-specked asphalt and the taste of iron in my mouth. Shame, fury, and disbelief swirled until my chest ached. How do you process something so wrong it feels like a fever dream? How do you face your daughter when she's smiling in her wedding veil one moment and betraying her vows the next? That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the flutes untouched in their box, and tried to pray. No words came, only questions. Do I tell Ethan, break his heart and his trust in both the woman he loves and the father who raised him? Do I keep silent and watch my daughter enter a marriage built on deceit? When Claire came by later to finalize seating charts, she acted as though nothing had happened. She talked about table linens, menu cards, her honeymoon dress. I watched her hands flutter over the lists and thought, do you even realize the cost of what you've done? I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I pictured Ethan's face, so open, so kind, I felt sick. I remembered the way he'd helped me move my garden pots last month, insisting I sit while he did the heavy lifting. He called me Mom. Already, and I'd almost started to believe I'd gained a son. 3 days. That's all the time I had to decide whether to detonate the wedding or let it proceed under the shadow of a lie. My phone buzzed with congratulations texts, hair appointment reminders, and the photographer's schedule, while inside me a war raged. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I stood in front of the mirror rehearsing the words, Ethan, there's something you need to know, but the thought of watching his world collapse, of seeing Martha's eyes when she learned the truth, rooted me to the floor. So I did nothing. I chose silence, thinking maybe it was mercy, but mercy has a way of turning into poison when it's mixed with secrets. And I had no idea that just after the vows were spoken, truth would come galloping into that reception hall uninvited, and everything would unravel without me saying a word. Dawn before the rehearsal broke across my bedroom ceiling like wet paint I couldn't wipe away. I dozed in 10-minute snatches, jolting awake each time Claire's laugh or Richard's low whisper echoed through my skull. Outside, sparrows trilled their ordinary songs, careless of the catastrophe fluttering in my chest. I brewed chicory coffee strong enough to steady a sailor and sat with my Bible open, though my eyes didn't track the words. "Lord," I whispered, "you know secrecy rots a house from the inside. Show me which wall to tear down." The only answer was the kettle clicking cool. By 9 a.m., Claire burst in, veil box tucked beneath one arm, her joy practically steaming off her skin. She wanted my opinion on a last-minute shoe swap, crystal pumps versus pearl-tipped flats. I nodded and murmured while she twirled, yet all I saw was that lake house bedsheet knotting around her ankles. "Mom, are you all right?" she asked, pausing mid-spin. My throat tightened. How easy it would be to spill it right then, to let truth crash onto the hardwood like a dropped chandelier. But she stood there glowing, and the woman who taught her that lies, poison love couldn't form the first syllable. I forced a smile. "Just tired, baby. Weddings steal a mother's sleep." She hugged me, the scent of gardenias in her hair wrapping around my guilt. When she left, the door clicked like a verdict, accomplice by silence. The rehearsal dinner unfolded at Pinecrest Country Club, all mahogany paneling and chandeliers that shimmered like polite laughter. Ethan greeted every guest personally, cheeks dimpled, eyes bright with the kind of goodness you can't fake. Richard arrived late, claiming traffic, Martha on his arm. I watched him clap his son's back, toast the happy couple, and imagined a serpent wearing a boutonniere. When my turn came to offer a toast, I rose, hands trembling enough to rattle the silverware. "To love," I began, voice too thick, "and to the courage that keeps it honest." Richard's gaze flicked toward me, quick, cutting, but I kept my eyes on Ethan, praying the words lodged somewhere in his spirit. After dinner, while guests drifted toward valet, I found myself beside Richard in the hallway lined with wedding portraits of strangers. The scent of his aftershave cedar and guilt tightened my stomach. "What do you want?" he whispered, eyes scanning for eavesdroppers. "For you to fear God more than pleasure," I said. He snorted. "You gonna blow up your daughter's life to make a point?" "I wouldn't need to if you hadn't set the dynamite." His smile chilled me. "You won't tell. You're too devoted to appearances. Better a lie in lace than a scandal in the papers, right?" I stepped closer, heat flooding my cheeks. "I'm devoted to truth. If it doesn't explode tonight, understand it's only because I haven't heard from the Lord which fuse to light." For the first time, I saw a tremor in his bravado. Good, let him quake. Back home, the house felt like a ticking clock. I laid out my mother of the bride dress, a deep plum that complemented my cocoa skin. As I smoothed its satin bodice, a wave of nausea hit. Was I really preparing to watch vows I knew were already broken? I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window and begged heaven for a sign etched clearer than my own warring heart. The sign came at 2 a.m., though I didn't recognize it then. My phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but you need to check the groom's suite before the ceremony. Trust me." A friend, my pulse galloped. A prank, a threat, or Providence cracking the silence I'd trapped myself inside? I stared until the screen dimmed, then copied the message onto a notepad just in case. At sunrise, Robin's calling. I pinned a silk flower in my hair and slipped that note into my clutch beside a monogrammed handkerchief. If truth insisted on arriving unannounced, I meant to be ready. The limousine ride to St. Augustine Chapel blurred. Oak canopies, brick sidewalks, tourists snapping photos unaware. That inside my chest a war council sat in session. Claire's voice rang from the bridal car ahead, laughing with bridesmaids. Ethan's groomsmen huddled near the steps, adjusting boutonnieres. Richard paced near the fountain, phone pressed to his ear, sweat beading beneath impeccable grooming. The organist began prelude. Guests filed inside, programs fluttering like nervous birds. I stood beneath the portico, wrestling with the choice. March down the aisle, holding my secret like smuggled contraband, or find that groom's suite and deliver the text's warning. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Then the chapel doors swung shut behind the last guest, and I realized heaven had pushed me firmly in one direction. Stay tuned, dear friends. A single knock on the groom's door sends shockwaves through vows not yet spoken, and the revelation no one expected crashes the ceremony harder than any confession I could have made myself. Don't miss how truth finally claims its seat at the altar. The chapel's west wing held the groom's suite, a paneled room that smelled of polished cedar and cologne with stained glass light pooling on Persian rugs. I prayed my heels wouldn't echo, but each click felt like a gavel. Outside, the string quartet eased into canon in D. Inside, my pulse hammered a discordant drum. I paused, fist hovering at the door, and mouthed a final plea. Lord, if you truly sent that text, let truth come clean without destroying every soul in its path. Then I knocked. Ethan opened half a heartbeat later, tuxedo jacket slung over his arm, freckles standing out against pre-wedding nerves. One look at my face and his smile faltered. Mom, is everything all right? Claire okay? May I come in? My voice surprised me steady, almost gentle. He stepped aside. Groomsmen scattered, sensing adult talk. When the door clicked shut, I handed Ethan the folded note. He read, brow knitting. A prank? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. But my spirit says we can't ignore it. He squared his shoulders. Then we check. Loyalty and courage. No wonder my daughter once fell for him. He motioned toward the inner dressing alcove where Richard was said to be tying Ethan's Windsor knot. We found Richard alone, sitting on a leather sofa, phone to his ear, voice hushed but unmistakably heated. He looked up, annoyance flashing before he masked it with paternal warmth. Everything okay? He asked. Ethan held out the note. Someone says we need to verify something. Richard read, lips whitening. Ridiculous, he scoffed, rising. Probably jealous ex. Dad, Ethan interrupted, eyes steady. Yesterday you avoided me. Last night you were out past midnight, and Claire's been different. I love you, but I need honesty right now. Silence thickened. Richard's gaze flicked toward me, maybe hoping I'd rescue him with motherly diplomacy. Instead, I folded my arms and waited. The stained glass sun cast ruby shards across his face, highlighting sweat beating at his temples. Finally, Richard exhaled a tremor. I made a mistake, he said, a single lapse. It meant nothing. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed. With whom? Footsteps in the hall, bridesmaids giggling then fading. Richard's next words came out a ragged whisper. Claire! Ethan staggered as though punched. I steadied him by the elbow. He shook, jaw clenched so tight I feared his teeth might crack. Richard reached for his son, but Ethan pulled away. How long? Ethan rasped. Once, Richard insisted. A week ago, we were both vulnerable. Ethan turned to me, equal parts ache and accusation. I swallowed shards of guilt. I found out 3 days ago, I said. I couldn't decide how to tell you. Grief flashed into his eyes, but before he could speak, a knock rattled the outer door. Martha's voice floated in. 5 minutes, boys. Richard moved as if to hide. Ethan blocked him. Mom deserves truth, too, he hissed. Go tell her or I will. Richard deflated, shoulders sagging as though decades piled on in seconds. He brushed past us, opened the suite door, and called softly, Martha, could you come in a moment? I heard Martha's surprised reply, then her heels clicking in, the door shut. Muffled voices rose. Richard's confession, Martha's gasp, a choked sob. I felt like I was standing inside a storm cloud, thunder without lightning. Ethan slid to the floor, back against the cedar paneling. Tuxedo abandoned. Tears carved silent tracks down his cheeks. I knelt beside him. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He shook his head. Not your sin, but thank you for knocking. Outside, the organ shifted to the processional, cueing bridesmaids down the aisle. Unaware the groom was shattered in the wings, Ethan wiped his face, stood, and straightened his shirt. Resolve hardened. The wedding's off, he said, voice low, and Claire is going to explain it, not me. I followed as he strode toward the sanctuary doors. In the vestibule, ushers looked puzzled while flower girls practiced spins. Ethan signaled the officiant, Reverend Porter, who calmly escorted him aside. Within minutes, murmurs rippled through the pews. Claire, bouquet trembling, emerged from the bridal room, confusion clouding her features. When Reverend Porter motioned her and Ethan into the narthex, every guest leaned forward like wheat bending toward an oncoming storm. Doors closed, muffled voices. Claire's rising, Ethan's breaking, Richard's pleading, Martha's weeping. Then a single word penetrated the heavy wood. How? Claire cried. Seconds later, a slap cracked. Martha, at Richard, perhaps. Gasps erupted among guests. Whispers fluttered like startled doves. The doors reopened. Reverend Porter stepped onto the altar, microphone in hand, face solemn. Dear friends, he began, today's ceremony will not proceed. The families ask for your understanding and prayers. A collective exhale swept the chapel, shock, sympathy, curiosity. I glimpsed Claire collapsing into a pew, veil askew, mascara bleeding. Ethan, flanked by his groomsmen, walked past rows of rattled relatives, dignity wrapped around devastation. Richard and Martha exited separately. Richard crimson with shame, Martha a statue of betrayal. I lingered in the aisle, heart both heavy and strangely light. Truth at last had taken center stage. Shock is a strange conductor. It carries silence longer than any scream. The chapel emptied in slow, reverent chaos, guests whispering, cell phones buzzing, pews creaking like old bones. Outside, the spring sky glowed perfect robin egg blue, indifferent to hearts cracking under its brightness. I found Claire alone in the bridal suite, wetty gown puddled around her like a snowdrift melting too fast. Her veil lay crumpled on the floor, a broken halo. Mascara streaks marbled her cheeks. In her hands, the bouquet drooped, calla lilies wilting in real time. Mom? Her voice was papery, small. What happened? Ethan keeps saying Dad and I. She choked as if the words burned. I closed the door, heartbeat thudding in my ears. Claire, I whispered, I saw you at the lake house. Her pupils blew wide, terror and shame colliding. You weren't supposed to. It was a mistake, a stupid, awful mistake. She reached for me. Help me fix this, please. I flinched, the memory of bed sheets searing fresh. Fix? A lie big enough to swallow a marriage whole can't be taped together with wishful thinking. My voice cracked. Love and disappointment wrestled inside every syllable. Ethan deserved truth before tux fittings and deposit checks. Claire crumpled, sobs tearing through silk layers. I dropped to my knees, lifted her chin with trembling fingers. I raised you to own your choices, I said. Today you watch them bloom. A knock interrupted Martha. eyes red-rimmed, holding a folded satin ring pillow like a headstone. She stared at Claire, voice brittle. Richard's gone to the hotel. I'm considering my next steps. Her gaze landed on me, softer. Will you drive Ethan home? He trusts you. I nodded. Claire's cry sharpened. Mom, don't leave me. I'm not leaving, I said gently. But right now Ethan needs safe harbor too. I pressed a handkerchief into her palm. My own mother's lace, now damp with Claire's tears. We'll talk tonight. Parking lot. Ethan leaned against my sedan. Jacket off, suspenders slack. His freckles looked stark, against eyes gone winter gray. He handed me the car keys as if they weighed 1,000 pounds. The ride to his apartment dwindled into a hush, broken only by our breathing. Halfway there he spoke, Do people ever recover from something like this? I gripped the wheel. People recover from war, from cancer, from burying children. Hearts are sturdy things when given honest ground to grow back. I paused, but reconciliation takes 2 gardeners. He stared out the window, voice a whisper. I thought my father was my hero. Heroes can fall, I said. Doesn't mean you have to live in the crater. At his complex, he thanked me with a hug laced in grief. As I turned to go, he called after me, Tell Claire, tell her I loved her enough to walk away rather than start our forever on quicksand. Back home, dusk painted the porch lilac. Richard's truck idled at the curb. He sat inside, face buried in hands. Claire's car was nowhere. Ada, guardian angel in orthopedic sandals, emerged from my kitchen holding 2 mugs of cocoa. She left a note, Ada said, pressing one mug into my hands. Claire's headed to a retreat center. Said she needs space to repent and think. I unfolded the note. Claire's handwriting wobbled. Mom, I'm sorry for dragging you into my darkness. Please pray for me. I'll call when I'm ready to face what I've done. A sigh escaped me. Equal parts sorrow and strange relief. Ada touched my shoulder. And him? She nodded toward Richard's truck. I squared my shoulders and walked to the driver's side. He looked up, eyes bloodshot, jaw trembling. I lost everything today, he rasped. No, I corrected. You finally saw what you were throwing away. I inhaled, steadied my voice. Go home, Richard. Start by telling your wife every truth you've hidden, even the ones I don't know. Then maybe you'll still have a sliver of self-respect to rebuild on. He swallowed, tears spilling. Thank you for not telling Martha sooner. Don't thank me, I said, voice stone. I was wrong to stay silent. Truth belonged to Ethan from the start, and my delay cost him miles of pain. Richard started the engine, pulled away, taillights vanishing into newborn darkness. I watched until the street fell empty, then sank onto the porch swing. The night smelled of jasmine again, but now its sweetness carried sorrow, a reminder that beauty blooms even over buried bones. Ada sat beside me. Where does this leave you? Somewhere between heartbreak and hope, I said. I still have a daughter who needs repentance, a would-be son nursing betrayal, and a conscience learning the hard difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. Stars prick the sky. Crickets tune their midnight orchestra. I closed my eyes, whispered a prayer that tomorrow would dawn wise enough to begin healing scars still pink and tender. If you're still with me, dear friends, tighten your seatbelts, because the gossip mill is only just beginning to roar. And before we wade into fresh drama, do me a kindness. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments. Have you ever kept a secret that almost swallowed you alive? Your stories give the rest of us courage. The morning after the non-wedding tasted like bitters and burnt toast. Headlines sprouted quicker than dandelions. Small-town wedding implodes, groom's father to blame. Local radio hosts cackled over the ultimate father-in-law fail. while church ladies pretended prayer requests weren't thin veils for curiosity. I tried to stay busy returning rental linens, mailing apology notes, dismantling rose garlands still sticky with dreams. Yet everywhere I went, whispers trailed me like burrs. Poor Gloria. Did you know? My silence hadn't saved anyone. It only fed rumor's appetite. By Wednesday afternoon, the front porch groaned beneath sympathy casseroles. I'd just finished labeling another foil pan broccoli mystery when the doorbell rang. Through the glass, I saw a woman in a charcoal suit, mid-40s, clipped bob, eyes sharp as thumbtacks. A badge flashed on her lapel. Detective Sandra Lynn, County Sheriff's Office. "Mrs. Mayfield," she said, voice calm but purposeful. "I'm investigating allegations of sexual exploitation and coercion involving Richard Bennett. May we speak?" My pulse skittered. "Come in." Ada slipped into the hallway, hovering like a guardian angel with a spatula. Detective Lynn noted her presence, then opened a slim notebook. "We've received a statement from Claire," she said. "She claims Richard used his position and the wedding preparations to pressure her into a relationship. She provided text messages and dates." Ice slithered down my spine. So Claire had broken her silence but painted herself victim, not participant. I wanted to believe her, yet memory of those lake house sheets argued otherwise. Detective Lynn continued, "We also have prior complaints, real estate interns, a swim coach's assistant, none press charges, but patterns matter." I inhaled. "How can I help?" "Claire mentioned you witnessed one encounter. I need your account." The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome of dread. Telling the detective meant confirming Claire's story or complicating it. I could soften the edges, but truth doesn't come in half shades. I described exactly what I saw. 2 consenting adults. No visible force. No tears. Just betrayal-ridden tangled limbs. Detective Lynn's pen paused. "So you didn't perceive coercion?" "I perceived sin," I said, heart aching, "but not force. If Richard manipulated her psychologically, I can't attest. Only Claire can." She nodded, thanked me, asked if Ethan knew. I explained our last conversation. Before leaving, she leveled a steady gaze. "When families refuse to speak, predators thrive. Thank you for choosing clarity." The door clicked shut. Ada exhaled a prayer. I slumped at the table, guilt gnawing like termites. Had I just wounded my daughter's chance at legal recourse or laid groundwork for honest healing? Either way, the die was cast. That evening, a battered Honda pulled into my driveway. Ethan stepped out. Eyes still shadowed, but posture firmer. Beside him stood a silver-haired woman in sunflower yellow scrubs carrying a medical bag. "Mom," Ethan said softly, "this is Cora Jameson, my late mother's sponsor from Celebrate Recovery. She knows messes and mending." Cora's smile radiated warmth strong enough to thaw January. "I'm here because broken hearts need triage," she said, voice like gospel blues. "Mind if we sit?" We settled on the porch swing. Ethan confessed sleepless nights. Anger spasms, flashes of grief sharper than glass. Cora listened, then turned to me. "Gloria, you shoulder boulders alone. Caretakers forget their own fractures." Tears blurred the azaleas beyond the railing. She reached into her bag, produced 3 smooth river stones, and laid them in our palms. "Write 1 word on each," she instructed, offering a marker. "Your burden, your hope, your next step." Ethan printed betrayal, peace, boundaries. I wrote guilt, truth, forgiveness. Cora gathered the stones into a linen pouch. "Tomorrow we'll walk to the river and cast the burdens away. The hopes and steps you keep a pocket reminder." Simple, perhaps, but solace seeped in like evening cool. As dusk painted the sky mauve, Cora prayed a melody of grace that wrapped porch boards and bruised spirits alike. Before they left, Ethan hugged me, longer, steadier. I'm entering counseling. Taking leave from work, he said. When I'm strong enough, I'll talk to Claire, no promises, just closure. I nodded. Heart equal parts sorrow and pride. Progress measured in inches still counts as forward. That night I lay awake, wind-rattling shutters. Somewhere downtown, Richard faced detectives. Elsewhere, Claire wrestled with half-truths and full consequences. Yet for the first time since those lake house sheets, I sensed a path crooked, thorny, but lit by earnest hands holding river stones. Morning mist hugged the riverside greenway when Cora, Ethan, and I met to cast our stones. The river ran slow and pewter gray, mirroring clouds that looked too heavy to float. We stood at the water's edge, shoes sinking into rain-soaked loam, each clutching the linen pouch like a fragile promise. Cora began with a hymn-soft prayer. Lord, teach us to lay down what was never ours to carry. She untied the pouch, handed Ethan his stones, then mine. Cool slate pressed against my skin. Guilt on one, truth on another, forgiveness curved across the third like a dare. Ethan went first. He hurled betrayal far. It splashed, vanished. He set peace gently on the surface. Current swept it away with surprising speed. He pocketed boundaries, nodding as if an invisible mentor approved. My turn. I weighed guilt, felt its jagged edges even through marker ink, and flung it so hard my shoulder twinged. Truth followed in a smooth arc. No more hiding. I hesitated over forgiveness. Was I ready to absolve Richard, Claire, myself? The river whispered anyway, and I let the stone slip from my palm. Water closed over it without judgment. Wind rose, scattering damp hair across my face. Cora collected the empty pouch, smiling. Lighter? She asked. Ethan's eyes answered yes. Mine, not yet, but closer. Back home, a sheriff's cruiser idled at the curb. Detective Lynn stepped out holding 2 subpoenas sealed in plastic. Richard's attorney subpoenaed you and Ethan for testimony, she said. Preliminary hearing next month. Ethan's shoulders squared. We'll be there. Lynn's tone softened. And Mrs. Mayfield, your statement helped corroborate other victims. Thank you. After she left, I brewed lemon balm tea while Ethan scrolled voicemail. A message from Martha crackled through the speaker. Gloria, could we meet? There's something I need to give you. Her voice sounded like a door opening in a house long shuttered. We drove to Martha's bungalow that afternoon. She greeted us with red-rimmed eyes but an unbroken spine. In her hands, a cedar keepsake box. I found this in Richard's study, she said, motioning us to the sofa. Inside the box lay a stack of notarized apology letters. One addressed to Ethan, another to Martha. A final envelope labeled Claire, all clearly written before the wedding. Underneath, a USB drive and a life insurance policy naming Ethan as sole beneficiary. Richard's handwriting wavered on a note. If truth crushes us, may these words begin the rebuild. Martha exhaled. His plea bargaining will serve time. He asked me to deliver these. She pressed the letters into our hands. I don't know if repentance can untangle what he did, but I'm tired of carrying his knots. Tears welled. Ethan embraced her. Grief and grace mingled in the quiet. Martha turned to me. Gloria, I spent years admiring your faith. I hope someday you'll let me sit beside you in church again. I squeezed her hand. No promises yet, but room for possibility. That evening, Claire phoned. Her voice sounded raw, sanded down by confession and counselors. Mom, Detective Lynn visited me today. I told her everything, how I craved Richard's approval, how he blurred every boundary. She sniffed. I'm entering an inpatient program for trauma and accountability. Ethan won't speak to me, but I understand. I inhaled, pain and pride twining inside. I love you, Claire. Recovery shines brighter than any veil. Will you visit? She asked. Yes, I said, but only if we leave pretense at the door. Her sob was relief-shaped like sound. We set a date for next week. After the call, I walked onto the porch where twilight crouched violet over Maple Street. Fireflies winked between azalea leaves. Somewhere a child's laughter skipped like a stone across dusk. I traced the outline of the river stone still in my pocket, boundaries borrowing its steadiness. Ada joined me with shortbread cookies and tomorrow's to-do list, flower beds to weed, subpoenas to notarize, hearts to keep beating. You think redemption's really possible? She asked. I think it's water, I said, eyes on the stars blinking alive. You can't grip it, but if you open your hands, it fills them. Ada smiled, offering a cookie. I bit into buttery crumbs, tasted hope laced with lemon. The county courthouse smelled of lemon polish and unresolved prayers when we filed through security for Richard's preliminary hearing. Reporters jostled outside, their lenses greedy for close-ups of shattered vows. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed like anxious bees. I wore the same plum dress I'd chosen for the wedding that never was. Let truth see what it had ruined and what it could still restore. Ethan walked beside me, shoulders squared beneath a charcoal suit cut one size looser since heartbreak carved pounds from his frame. Martha clutched a tissue already shredded by her trembling fingers. Cora and Ada flanked us like guardian pillars, riverstones tucked in their pockets. Judge Lenora Haynes' white curls, eyes flinty as winter dawn presided. The state called Detective Lynn first. She outlined patterns of grooming, texts retrieved from Richard's phone, bank transfers buying silence. Murmurs rippled through the gallery like wind across wheat. Claire appeared via video link from the recovery center. Her hair was pulled back, face scrubbed raw of makeup and denial. She described the afternoon at the lake house, how Richard praised her vulnerability, promised to shoulder her pre-wedding jitters if she would share a secret no one else could have. Her voice cracked on the phrase, yet she didn't avert her gaze. When the prosecutor asked whether she felt coerced, she answered, yes, because approval was the currency he knew I craved. I pressed hand to my chest, pain pulsing with mother love and regret. Then it was my turn. Sworn in, I relayed the scene I'd witnessed, the silence I kept, the stone I'd thrown into the river named guilt. Braun, Richard's new attorney, tried to paint my delay as questionable credibility. I met Judge Haynes's eyes and said, silence can be a sin of convenience, Your Honor. I will live with that, but it doesn't change what I saw. The gavel rapped once. Objection overruled. Richard took the stand last, shackled wrists, orange jumpsuit muted beneath a gray blazer his lawyers insisted upon. He opened a small notebook, voice quivering. I wrote apologies, but apologies are rice paper in a flood. He confessed not only to Claire, but to 2 interns and a neighbor's college-age son, each encounter wrapped in the same promise of mentorship and secrecy. Gasps erupted. Ethan's jaw tightened, then loosened, as though a final puzzle piece had snapped into place. Braun requested a recess. Judge Haynes denied it. We will finish what deceit began, she said. The prosecutor entered the USB from Richard's study audio files, of Richard dictating a diary of fears about exposure, strategies for silence. His own words condemned him louder than any witness. Closing statements blurred at the edges of my hearing. I watched Ethan instead. With every revelation, his posture straightened, pain forging backbone. Martha wept silently. Cora's arm wrapped around her shoulders. Across the aisle, Richard's eyes pleaded for something unnamed absolution, perhaps, but no one reached to grant it. Finally, Judge Haynes spoke. Probable cause established on all counts. Trial date set. Bail denied. Due to risk of witness intimidation. Her gavel fell like iron forgiveness, harsh, necessary. Court adjourned. In the hallway, flashes exploded, questions volleyed. Mrs. Bennett, will you testify at trial? Ethan, any comment for victims? Detective Lynn cleared a path. Outside, gray clouds pressed low, thunder rolled distant as if heaven itself rumbled agreement. We gathered beneath the courthouse portico, rain beginning to mist. Ethan exhaled. It's strange, he said, voice soft, but hearing everything ugly as it was makes room for clean air again. Martha nodded, eyes swollen yet resolute. I'll sell the lake house. Donate the proceeds to survivors' counseling funds. I squeezed her hand. Good soil from scorched earth. A taxi pulled up. Inside waited Claire's counselor, ready to escort Ethan and me to the rehab facility family session day. Ethan glanced at me. You sure? No place I'd rather be, I said. Healing's early, but the door's open. As we drove, rain turned to downpour, windshield wipers slapping a steady beat. I thought of the river stones now tucked inside Ethan's pocket, the ones we kept. Boundaries and forgiveness. Outside, gutters overflowed, yet the city kept breathing, refusing to drown. I whispered a prayer no judge could sign. Let broken things teach us to build kinder. The rehab campus emerged. White clapboard buildings ringed by dogwoods in hesitant bloom. Claire would be inside, waiting, perhaps fearful, perhaps hopeful. Either way, truth had cleared a path to her door, and we were walking it slowly together. The rehab center's family room smelled faintly of chamomile and wet earth carried in on our shoes. Claire sat in a circle of upholstered chairs, knees pressed together, fidgeting with the linen pouch that once held my river stones. Her counselor, Ms. Tanaka, nodded as Ethan and I entered. Claire's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Thank you for coming, she whispered. Voice rough with weeks of therapy and sleepless nights, Ethan settled opposite her, close enough to share breath, distant enough to protect fragile boundaries. Ms. Tanaka invited us to speak intentions for the session. Ethan went first, fingers steepled. I'm here to listen, set boundaries, and someday forgive. Claire's shoulders shook at the last word, hope and shame battling for space. I said, I'm here to love both my children, by birth and almost marriage, the way truth loves us, without disguise. Claire drew a trembling breath. Mom, Ethan, I wronged you both. Richard targeted my insecurity. I stepped over lines I knew were sacred. She reached into the pouch and produced a single smooth stone, the word repentance, scrawled in violet marker. This is the only stone I kept, she said, because I have to carry it until it grows into something better. Silence stretched heavy, needed. Ethan blinked tears, but nodded. I accept your repentance, he said, but trust rebuilds on evidence, not promises. His voice cracked. I'll need time. Claire pressed the stone to her heart. I'll give you all the time you ask. Ms. Tanaka guided us through breathing exercises, then asked Claire to describe a vivid memory of Ethan's kindness. Claire recounted the night he stayed awake sewing pearls onto her veil after a bead mishap, how he pricked his finger but kept smiling. Ethan listened, jaw working, tears surfacing again. Kindness remembered often tills soil for grace. At session's end, Ms. Tanaka suggested a ritual. Each of us write one action we will take toward healing during the next month. Claire pledged daily accountability journaling. Ethan committed to individual therapy focused on betrayal trauma. I vowed to end the silent cycle in our family. Speaking truth at sunrise instead of midnight, we exchanged brief, tentative hugs. As Ethan and I left, Claire called after us, "Thank you for not writing me off." I turned, met her eyes, and answered, "Grace writes no one off, baby." 1 month later, Richard's formal sentencing drew a packed courtroom. Victims delivered statements, some shaking, some defiant. Claire, hair cropped in a symbolic restart, read hers last. She spoke of the allure of paternal approval, the destruction of self-worth, and the cost of secrecy. Then, an audible gasp rippled through the gallery. She turned to Ethan. "I want to release you," she said. "May your future be free of my shadows." Ethan's eyes glistened, but he offered a small nod. Judge Haynes acknowledged Claire's courage, then sentenced Richard to 4 years in state prison, mandatory rehabilitation programs, and restitution funds to each victim. As deputies led him away, Richard paused, meeting Ethan's gaze. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. There was no Hollywood choir of reconciliation, but something in Ethan's shoulders loosened. Outside, rain had rinsed the sky clean. Reporters pressed microphones forward. Ethan spoke plainly. "Justice isn't revenge, just repair. Today, repair began." Claire gave no statement. She slipped a river stone labeled "Courage" into my palm and walked with her counselor toward a waiting car. 6 months later, Maple Street bloomed with dogwood petals when Ethan invited me and Martha to a modest backyard cookout. No photographers, no whispering neighbors, just burgers, lemonade, and a sense of lungs filling after too long underwater. Martha presented a donation receipt. Proceeds from the lake house sale had funded a scholarship for survivors of coercion pursuing counseling degrees. Ethan planned to volunteer at the nonprofit that ran the scholarship board. As twilight settled, fireflies ignited across the lawn. I felt the stone Claire had given me. Courage warming in my pocket, Ada nudged my elbow. "Look," she whispered. Claire stood at the gate, sober eyes scanning the gathering. Ethan noticed, stepped forward. No romantic music swelled, no grand gestures, just two people acknowledging mutual humanity. Ethan gestured to an empty chair. Claire hesitated, then entered, setting her stone on the picnic table. Boundary keeping now sat side by side with invitation. I exhaled, feeling the last heavy scale of guilt slide from my heart. Secrets had broken us. Truth, gritty, painful, relentless, had stitched us into something scarred yet sturdy. When the first stars pricked the sky, Ethan raised a mason jar of lemonade. "To building on bedrock, not sand," he said. We clinked glasses. Martha, Ada, Claire, Cora, still in sunflower scrubs, and me. The clink sounded like hammers and nails in a new foundation. I whispered a final prayer. Let every scar remind us where walls gave way and windows opened instead. The night answered with cricket lullabies, and for the first time in a year, my soul rested easy.